Welcome! I'm Claudia Middleton Moreno, the Curatorial Fellow for Contemporary Art at the Blaffer Art Museum. Today we are looking at the 47th MFA Thesis exhibition held here at the Blaffer Art Museum. This is put on by the University of Houston School of Art, and today we get to hear the Artist Gallery Talks, a rare opportunity to hear these artists talk about their own work and what it means to them. Thank you all for watching. Let's go hear from the artists. Welcome. This is the Artist Gallery Talks for the 47th MFA Thesis exhibition. We are so privileged to have had 3 sets or rounds of these talks over the past 3 weeks. The show closes next week, so if you haven't seen everything in the exhibition, do come back and see everything. Today we have the ultimate privilege of being able to hear from 4 wonderful artists, all here on the upper level. We have Maddie Casagranda, Jennifer Marion, Roslyn Dupre, and Coulter. So do stay for the full talks if you can. There is lunch to follow, totally free. And welcome to the Blaffer. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Claudia Middleton Moreno. I'm the Curatorial Fellow here, and I've had the privilege of getting to know all of the artists throughout the course of the show. So I'm going to be moderating and giving them their introductions today. So Maddie Casagranda is an educator as well as an artist. She has taught at the high school and the collegiate levels and has worked as a teaching artist in the community. Her work has been exhibited nationally and internationally, including at Blaffer Art Museum, Elgin Street Studios, PH21 Gallery, PRPG.mx, Utah Division of Arts and Museums, the Springville Museum of Art, the Southeast Center for Photography, and the Praxis Gallery. Maddie will receive her MFA in Photography and Digital Media from the University of Houston this spring. Welcome, Maddie.
Thank you, Claudia. It's been so great to work with you. My name is Maddie. I am finishing up my 3rd year in the graduate program here at U of H. I've been extremely lucky to work with the amazing cohort I've been a part of, and lucky to show along with all the other artists in this show. My artistic practice and the resulting work has shifted drastically in the last 3 years. Those shifts began during my 1st semester when I gave birth to my son, Gio, smack in the middle of the semester, and began the challenge of attempting to play the role of both artist and mother. During the following year, I really struggled to make work as I jumped into the depths of breastfeeding or pumping every 2 hours, intense sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, mental fatigue, and short-term memory loss. In a desperate attempt to make something, I paused my intense, time-consuming darkroom practice and shifted my image making to disposable film cameras. So you can see on this back wall here what the result of that was. I bought a bulk pack of them and spread them out throughout my living space. I had them on tables, on my bed, everywhere I looked. And every time I breastfed my son, I made a singular image. The images were not planned or composed, and they were made sporadically without much thought. I didn't get them developed or scan them or even look at them until months later, and none of them were edited out or deleted. This type of image making without a plan was very strange, uncomfortable, and risky for me. It felt very different than what I'd made in the past, but my circumstances demanded it, so I forced myself to lean into it. This became a visual data collection that shifted my practice as I began to take on the restrictions of being a parent. Over time, I became more able to lean into the difficulties of parenthood instead of resisting them. And at the same time, my role as a mother began to be more symbiotic with the part of me that identified as an artist. As this happened, my work also became less autobiographical and more relevant to a larger conversation about gendered labor. I became obsessed with the work of many artist mothers like Sarah Irvin, Annie Wang, Meryl Laderman-Ukeles, and Lenka Clayton, and read a lot of theory and discourse about the politics of care. The conversations happening among historical and contemporary artist mothers validated me, fascinated me, and helped me feel less isolated. I wanted to reference the work of one of these artists in this talk. Meryl Laderman-Ukeles was a self-proclaimed maintenance artist. She talked about 2 basic systems, and those 2 systems are progress and maintenance. Progress is what society craves and is centered on the male role of pure individual creation, the new, change, progress, advance, excitement. On the other side, maintenance is typically assigned to women to keep the dust off that pure individual creation, preserve the new, sustain the change, protect progress, defend and prolong the advance, and renew the excitement. After being rejected by several institutions, she wanted to address the maintenance side of these systems in contemporary art. Marion shifted to using her body in public performance art. In washing/track/maintenance outside 1973, she scrubbed and mopped the stairs of the entrance to the Wadsworth Athenaeum, connecting private and public at the site of the maintenance of the art institution. In her care manifesto, she detailed the, quote, sour ball of every revolution. After the revolution, who's going to pick up the garbage on Monday morning? My practice addresses my own frustration with these systems, and my dual presence as a woman artist and subject is one way I'm taking ownership of my body and the work. I'm addressing the body being consumed by domestic spaces through my own performance of gestures of care within those spaces. In this performance piece, titled Bed Rest, I perform gestures of care, most often assigned to women, with the vicious repetition they occur within. The gestures of care performed on the bed reference the sensation of never really being physically alone, but feeling intense loneliness within the multifaceted role of mother. Like in a factory, these mundane motions of motherhood become familiar, part of a muscular and cognitive memory. I accept the role of my body as a tool in my care and in my art. Continuing to think about the physicality of motherhood, I also made many iterations of this performance piece in my yard space, where I carried items that weighed roughly the same amount as my son, which was at the time about 30 pounds. I was thinking about how my body has changed and adapted since becoming a mother. This time I welcomed my son and implicated him as a fellow artist and performer by dressing the same, and decided that the end of his bandwidth would indicate the end of the performance. Including him and attempting to care for him while carrying this basket and making the work all at the same time really started to align care work and artwork for me, and I was thinking a lot about how they could even exist completely together. I also want to talk about my textile work. I'll admit that I could not have threaded a sewing machine before beginning grad school, but my evolving relationship with my mother and grandmother, as I've also become mother, brought the medium into my practice. When I was a child, they both made efforts to teach me how to sew and how to quilt, but for whatever reason, I was not interested and did not take advantage of their time and resources. So asking them to teach me these things again in my adulthood has been an interesting relationship shift within 3 generations of mothers. It also started me thinking on a path about how my work could both honor and critique gendered labor, and to be a safe space to hold tension there. To accompany the quilts I've started making, I wanted to use the concept of the embroidery hoop to frame the work, thinking about the connection between domestic and art spaces. There's a lot I could say about this, and I've thought extensively about it, but to keep it brief, using the embroidery hoop as a tool, as a large frame on the wall rather than a tool, implicates the medium and its history as capital A art, places women's work in a fine art context, and questions when artwork and care work are deemed finished or enough. And a continuation of my interest in data collection, this piece in the corner is made from hundreds of daily reports, the pieces of copy paper the teachers hand you when you collect your baby from childcare. They detail all kinds of information, everything they ate, every time they used the restroom, what they learned about, what their mood was, etc. Over time, they began to fill up my car and my countertops, and I found them fascinating artifacts to collect and sew together. So I want to connect all of this by readdressing my work in photography. Before becoming a parent, I would have identified as a capital P photographer, spending many, many hours in the darkroom perfecting my technical practice. As I said, the early months of motherhood really fragmented this for me. wasn't until my third year that I was really able to start to invest the time again to develop my own film and handprint my own images. I wanted to finish the program with a body of formal silver gelatin work because that is such a big part of my practice, and I wanted to make work about the loss of community-based systems of care. In the making of these photographs, I positioned myself and my son in the yard spaces of mothers in my community. This space is the border between private and public, where labels confront each other and start to blend reality and facade, perfection and imperfection, working and stay-at-home moms. Their bodies and our bodies interact around a shared space as we mourn the loss of systemic support together and imagine what a new post-capitalism type of village might look like. It's not necessarily a documentation of my village, rather references the labor it takes to build your own support system. And maybe imagining a future where women are supported and cared for in a community that values their labor. So I think the conversation happening between these two types of image making ended up interesting in this space. In some seasons, we're so focused in on ourselves, overcome completely by our own experience and simply trying to survive the isolated landscape of the domestic space. In other times, there's more time and energy to build community and think about the broader social and political implications of the things we are living. I want to finish by reading this paragraph from my thesis, and then would love any questions anyone has. Like Annie Wang proclaimed when she signed her pregnant belly with a pen, the labor of caring is an artistic endeavor in itself. Motherhood and maintenance are creative acts. As I've grown and adapted, I've come to recognize that the immense physical and emotional labor involved in care, as well as gestures of care, should be recognized as meaningful forms of creative expression and cultural production. This perspective, which is now integral to my artistic practice, deems acts of care and the related with them worthy of greater support while advocating for their integration into culture in more equitable ways. Thank you.
Maddie, thank you so much. Especially for our friends who are out in the annex, hello, thank you and welcome. We wanted to open it up in our last 5 minutes to questions or comments from the audience, just to take this deeper. This is a really special opportunity to talk directly to an artist about their work. So yeah, let's open it up. What questions do we have? I might repeat them for the camera, but I'm listening. Here. Yeah.
Can you talk about the craft making of the embroidery hoop?
Yes, so I conceptualized this idea to make very large hoops about 2 years ago. I reached out to several people who I thought maybe could help me pull it off, but all of them told me it was not possible to bend wood this way. I finally reached out to my dad, and the only reason I didn't reach out to him first was because he doesn't live here. But together we built, well, mostly him, me assisting / marveling at his innovation, but we built like a steamer, a box with a steamer blowing hot water into it, and over time we were able to bend the wood and then clasp it around like wooden circles so that it would hold that shape. So it's been quite a journey learning from him, and I was very grateful for his help, and we produced quite a bit of these, so I'm excited to keep working with them even after the show. So yeah.
I have a question, because I had no idea that you could sew paper. I was
Neither did I.
surprised. What was that experience like, and how many tries did you need to do to be able to get to where you were satisfied with how everything got like stuck together?
Yeah, I went through, it took like the sewing needles, I used a lot of them, so I had to replace them quite often because it's like poking through, like, and then also like it's poking paper like into your sewing machine, so you kind of have to like clean it out frequently. But I wanted to leave the seams on the outside just to show the process a little bit and just the chaos of parenthood. And it kind of reminds me of like artwork I made together with my son, or yeah, the colors, and yeah.
It's very impressive.
It took some practicing with paper to kind of figure it out. Yeah. but still doesn't pull as tight as like fabric would in a hoop. Like you can see it's warping a little. Yeah.
I have another question, if that's okay. Did you, when you were building the quilts, and I saw the one downstairs as well, did you just kind of put the fabric together? Did you have a plan of what you wanted it to look like, or was this just more random kind of putting the squares together?
Yeah, so I had it all on the floor. So what I would do is I put the hoop down and then like I cut all the pieces and then piece them until I was happy and until it was big enough to like fill past the hoop. Yeah, and that was actually like very physically challenging to work on the floor for so many hours, and it made me think of how much time I spend on the floor with my son, you know, like, but yeah, definitely like more very physically demanding type of working on the floor. I know some people have like big tables but yeah, this was made on the floor.
And that's a lot of real estate for a floor as well.
Right,
so,
yeah.
Maddie, you talked to me about how you don't see this work as necessarily autobiographical, even though it does capture some very personal moments from your life. Can you say a little bit more about like how you feel the work extends beyond you and your body?
Yeah, so like I said, I definitely see my body as a tool, and that was like a hard role for me to take on when I first became a mother, but I've embraced it and accepted it and decided that like in this season of my life I'm okay with that. And so it's sort of taken on that role in my work as well, with performance and other things. And I think that like any mother who watches this could relate to these long nights, you know, the labor that goes into it. And so I guess I see my body as almost like a proxy for anyone who's lived a similar experience.
And I guess one more question is like, as your son is growing up, how does your relationship to your art, how is it influenced by his like aging?
Yeah, that has been a really interesting shift. I'm definitely at this age starting to think more about consent and privacy, and you know, trying to include. I think he enjoys being part of my practice, and so until he doesn't, I am okay with including him. But I always want to give him like choices to make, and so I'm kind of just like, if, for example, in this video, just letting him like roam free and enter and exit the space as he wants to, and like I said, the video ends, the performance ends when my son decides that we're done. So I try to, I guess, exhibit care in that way, in the sense that I want him to be able to make decisions as he moves in and out of my artistic practice. But he definitely, like, he can turn on a camera and take a pic. Like he has taken on some interesting like habits that he's watched me do.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your words, Maddie. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Jennifer Marion, an interdisciplinary artist, born in Louisiana, raised in Tennessee, and who has lived in Texas for the past 17 years. Jennifer works primarily in photography, digital media, installation work, textile, and with found objects. She is exhibited at Lawndale, the Orange Show in Rome, and in Filter Space, Chicago. Jennifer will receive an MFA in photography and digital media from the University of Houston this spring. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm an interdisciplinary artist that makes work about caregiving shaped by routine, obligation, and resistance. A lot of my work is a visual autobiography exploring patriarchal obstacles. By continuously reanalyzing generational trauma in connection to maneuver my own way of healing, I navigate family dynamics as a queer single mother while creating a place for myself where all of my identities intersect. I started really taking art seriously after I became a parent. Before becoming a mother, I used art as a way to take my mind off of the harsh realities of all the baggage I was carrying. After the removal from my biological parents at birth, my view of human closeness was distorted. It took me a while to figure out exactly how to unpack that. I was born in Louisiana, raised in Tennessee, and have spent the past 17 years of my life living in various parts of Texas. During all of these transitions, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I've worked many jobs to keep the rent paid, but never really had a plan for my future. Finding myself took a really long time, and having a child shook my core enough and gave me the biological bond I had always longed for. These days, my work is motivated by determination, grit, and confrontation due to my custody battle and my resulting daily 3-hour commute from Beaumont to Houston and back 5 to 7 days a week due to a touching county order. Ever since I was accepted to the grad program in the fall of 2022, I had been making the 3.5 drive up until this past July. This body of work, titled Commute in Custody, documents my experience as a queer single mother navigating a custody battle where I became a vehicle by law for my daughter's transport. This 3-hour journey between Houston and Beaumont transformed my 2004 Honda CR-V into both a site of containment and a space for reclaiming agency. This work is fundamentally about making visible what is often overlooked. Through layered imagery and collected ephemera, I've created a record of the in-between, archived in phone camera images, taken at precise moments of urgency, looped video footage of endless highways, and found objects that trace the lived experience of constant movement. At the emotional core of my practice is tufting, punching fiber into cloth, which serves as both catharsis and creation. By tufting my ex's disrespectful text messages into vibrant, tactile pieces, I'm transforming digital words into physical presence that demands acknowledgement. The process itself, the puncturing, the threading, the final shaving, mirrors the intensity of motherhood and resistance. My installations invite you to become passengers, witnesses, and weight bearers in this experience. When you sit in the driver's seat surrounded by these tufted phrases and looped roadways, you encounter the relentlessness of these journeys and the quiet, persistent gravity of care. I approach these difficult realities through documentation and dark humor, creating in real time, often in carpool lines and parking lots, as a form of resistance against erasure. As I've written in my thesis, I think of myself as a polite menace, using art to transform personal trauma into something that can be shared rather than something that swallows me whole. This work isn't just my story. It reflects the experiences of countless women navigating similar systems. It's created for my daughter and for others caught in these battles to reclaim our narratives in a system that often leaves us feeling voiceless. Okay, let's take a moment to listen to the sound of the work.
We're going to do the same thing and open it up to questions, responses, comments. Anybody? About anything.
I feel like I'm getting car sleep in the best way possible. Especially with the sound. That was very immersive.
Thank you. I think.
Is the car seat from like your Honda that you drove back and forth?
No, that was my only cheat. This one's from a minivan that I found outside of an estate sale. It was free. But as far as like Honda CRV parts, the mirrors downstairs are from a 2004 Honda CRV, but the seat itself was just too expensive for me to buy from a junkyard, so I made do. Yes? Well, friends from Beaumont, this is not a recent science, so the population is incorrect, so please don't tell on me. But a lot of the signs were given to me, even by professors too, so. Yes.
I see, streamers and party like memorabilia and things that are really fun and humorous almost. Can you explain to me why, what the reason behind using something that is so accessible and kind of exciting to tell a story that is kind of dull or sad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my original plan with the streamers is this whole installation has gone through multiple iterations. My first year and a half here, I was working towards going through a custody battle and working towards the day that I needed to go to court to be able to fight to move to Houston to continue to finish grad school. But in that, once I got close enough and the whole court thing got situated, I kind of used it as like a spin on almost a divorce party sort of thing. So I started including a lot of like party supplies and elements like that. And I feel like showing it in this format, it's a lot easier to digest and a way for me to reclaim those words that were thrown at me. Mm-hmm.
I found it really interesting how it invites the viewer to sit in a particular spot and kind of be, I guess, immersed in it. Do you think that what was your thought process, I guess, as you designed the exhibition? Was it for the viewer to embody you, or was it something else?
I think I'm okay with either one, but the process in making it at first was I wanted you to see what I see, right? And unless you're experiencing it firsthand, you're not going to see it. So I was trying to think of different ways that I could bring all of these elements that I'm collecting, because on one end, while I'm dealing with this custody battle, I'm collecting text messages, I'm collecting like all these different files that I have to save to be able to go to court to prove my case. And while doing that in turn, I'm collecting art side, right? I'm collecting photographs driving back and forth. I'm collecting various objects. I'm collecting terrible phrases that I've had to screenshot and take to court with me. So that's kind of my way of putting you in the space with me. Mm-hmm.
You may have already mentioned this, but I guess ultimately, how was it for you having to juggle that personal life and then your schooling? I think both can be pretty overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
I think yours mentioned your practice being almost like an escapism.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess just how you feel overall, especially now that you're finished.
Relieved. I haven't had my defense yet, so that's next week, and then I'll feel more relieved. But yeah, the process itself was really, really stressful. But I mean, my daughter's 11 right now, so when I was an undergrad, she was 1. So I'm kind of used to juggling being a parent and having a child, but having to commute along with going through a custody battle was a new experience that I had to deal with.
Having worked with you in the first year and a half while you were here, you were working as my TA and listening to everything going on and now seeing this visually. It's like full circle, it sums it up, but it also is what you just said of how it's come to a close. It's like almost a celebration, but yet it's showing what you've gone through and knowing that this is, it's strong, it's it, and I do know I know a lot of the background, so for me it all comes together. It's fun.
Thank you.
I have a question going back to what you were saying about collecting. I wanted to know how you know when a moment is worth capturing something, or when you find something like a found object in a thrift store, does it speak to you? Like, what are the characteristics of the moments you collect, the objects you collect, the phrases, the words? Like, what are their characteristics?
Well, okay, I will say I have a problem. I go to garage sales and estate sales and already collect anyway. So so it's a lot of kind of sifting through what kind of I gravitated towards in the first place, and keep telling myself I'm going to use this eventually, and then I just don't use it. But anyway, I feel like it really depends. Like for the photographs, I mean, I'm technically a traditional photographer, right? Even though this is way beyond that. But I know how to take a good compositionally wise photograph. But I feel like I was less obsessed with taking my DSLR out and like manually setting everything. And it was more about quantity rather than quality with this work. And just continuing to keep that filing system going on both sides of my life. So this was just kind of a way for me to get that out into the world. But another way, let's see, I've always had a thing for little TVs, especially CRT TVs. I think it's becoming a problem. I'm collecting them too, but I also have a bunch of VHSs in my studio, so sorry. But yeah, I've just always been interested in just like the format of video, really, and photo.
And I also wanted to know if you wanted to speak at all about the pieces that aren't in this room. You have the vindictive air freshener and the rear view mirrors downstairs that are tufted, and then also the receipt printer. Do you want to say anything about those works?
Yeah, I mean, okay, the receipt outside is more of a tongue-in-cheek piece itself, because it's my MFA thesis paper that I just printed 5 times, and I just let it kind of fall onto the floor. It just kind of speaks with all of the gas receipts that I was collecting back and forth through the drive, which are also pinned on the side of that statement on this wall. As for the car freshener, those are typical things you see in your car, and I wanted to find a way to be able to incorporate that into my work, but also I wanted you to be able to experience these terrible phrases that I'm running through my mind and thinking about. So that's why I chose to kind of use the word vindictive. First I was planning on putting it up here, and then it ended up on this piece. And as for the mirrors, those are actually images that are on this wall too, that I had taken back and forth, blown up, and then tufted them and put them inside car mirrors.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Yeah, thank you.
I am very pleased to introduce Roslyn Dupre, a multidisciplinary artist and Gulf Coast native who is now based in Houston, Texas. Her work has been featured in various exhibitions, including Southern Gothic at Box 13, Art Space in 2022, and The Big Show 2024 at Lawndale Art Center, where she was recognized as an awardee. She has also participated in the Glassell's Studio School block programs, earning a Certificate of Achievement in Sculpture from the Museum of Fine Arts. Roslyn will receive an MFA in painting from the University of Houston this spring. Welcome, Roslyn.
Hi, I'm Roslyn Dupre, and I'm excited to have you all here. I like a lot of questions and interaction with my viewers, so when we get to the question part, I'd love to hear your interpretations of my work. But what I do, I'm a bricoleur, which means I'm an artist who is very much into do-it-yourself, making do with what's at hand, working with really humble objects, and focusing on process and material. So most of what I'm doing is using skills that I've acquired at some point, maybe sewing from my grandmother, painting from my dad, or construction from my dad. And I'm using those processes, and I'm looking for materials that have a particular resonance with me, like a little bit of juju. So things that are highly specific to my own life, to my own experiences, to the region in which I've lived, to the places I've lived. So what you see around you is very heavily focused on my life in the Gulf Coast. I've actually lived many, many places all over the world. But just like when I was living in Egypt, I was still this kid from New Orleans. I talk about those things that I carry with me wherever I go. So on this wall behind you, for example, there's a piece that's called As She Lay Dying. And I hope it looks to you like a series of glyphs or like almost writing something that you should be able to read but can't quite put your finger on it. Like, what is it doing? It feels like language, but it isn't. It looks like hair, but it isn't. What it actually is Spanish moss. And I started working with Spanish moss about 6 years ago during the pandemic. I was mad about something that happened, a political act by the person who was then in charge. And I went outside and I just put together things that were under the tree, so some pieces of wood and some Spanish moss, and I made a weapon out of it. It was called garrote, which is a tool that you would use to like strangle somebody. So it's an ineffective tool, right? But it was this kind of childish act, the way that you might do something when you were a kid and your parents say, okay, we've had enough, outside, don't come back till the sun's starting to come down. And you go and you start playing with the materials on the ground under the tree instead of your toys. So where this piece developed is that I started thinking about that Spanish moss, and I started playing with it and processing it, and eventually I got it to the point where I had a formula for fermenting it. It takes about 6 months, but I can strip the moss of the gray outer cuticle to reveal this brownish black inner fiber, and then I hand spin it into these skeins, which are now sort of my language. And I'm hoping that this operates like the writers of the Southern Gothic, like all these people I grew up reading, so Tennessee Williams, William Faulkner, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Harper Lee. And that information that came into me is kind of processed and moved around and shaken up, and I'm working with it in my way. And you have kind of this alien language that comes out as a result. And so this installation is kind of that idea just growing and growing over the years. This piece here is kind of my seafloor bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. It's got salt domes. That's what these white crystals are. The slick that looks like maybe an oil spill is actually pine sap that I've collected over years. When I go on walks, I'll flick the pine sap crystals off the trees, and I've collected and collected and collected that. I get different colors by overboiling it or underboiling it. The piece on this stand, again, is on another salt dome with this kind of tomato cage oil jack-up rig, but it's also operating for me as a little nutria. These are furs that I inherited from a cousin that I never knew, which is another big story. But that's what I do, and that's like the essence of my work. It's dealing with these materials, dealing with and using them with the techniques I have at hand, and then transforming them into unusual objects. So I've asked Claudia to be in conversation with me because
I have some prepared questions for you. I really wanted to talk about some of these unexpected materials. Thank you for mentioning the Spanish moss and how you got started working with that. Is there anything else that is something we might not expect in this exhibition that maybe looks one way and is something else?
Yeah, so this piece around the corner, the one that's called Eye and Core, it's kind of an abstracted, pardon? No, I'm sorry, the hanging one with all the strings. It's a series, it's techniques that I go back to over and over again. So there's string work there. There's these little pillows, which are a motif that show up in my work over and over again. Sometimes they represent time. Sometimes they're really just about creating some little palm-held object that's kind of dear to me. And the unexpected part of that is, even though I've created this form out of it that stands as a sculpture, there's information in there that isn't readily available. So some of the faces of those pillows are embroidered. Some of the pillows hold little objects from around my studio. But the idea is that it works as a form to create this sculpture, but it also works as part of the narrative, the storytelling part of it. So those are like little, I think of them as gris-gris, which are amulets. So in New Orleans, we have this history of voodoo and hoodoo. And gris-gris are little pouches that might be sewn and filled either with objects, cloth, maybe hair, or other things that carry a charm, a wish, have some sort of intent and energy placed on the object, and then one wears it close to the body and would carry it until the fulfillment of whatever the intent was. And so I think like that operates that same way, where there's these little hidden pieces in there.
Yeah, and that happens in some of your other works here as well, where you've like encoded some energetic narrative that might not be legible, but it is present, and it carries with it this aura of there's something else beneath the surface, which I think is really special. I was also curious about your tool making. You said you've made a lot of your tools by hand, and that process of like labor going into a work and then being a very process-driven work on top of that. Can you say a little bit about how that's important to you or your practice?
Sure. I think of my practice as being just my way of living. So it goes back to this identification as a bricoleur. I think a lot of the ethos is that we're reaching out and we're trying to come up with ways that are intensely personal to express ourselves. Like we're always in there. A lot of us as artists, even if we don't consider ourselves bricoleur, are looking for that unique way to get out that piece of you that's a little different. And so with making tools, like with the Spanish moss again, I hand spin that using a drop spindle that I've made. I've made a couple of versions of drop spindles, but that allows me to really refine and hone in on what I'm trying to do, what feel I'm trying to get. So if I make a drop spindle, like my first attempt at a drop spindle, it was producing a rope that was too thin and too fragile and too delicate, and I wanted something that had a little bit of meat and chunk to it. So head right back into the wood shop, throws together whatever, like scraps of wood that other people had left behind, made another one, and I just kept doing that until I had the right feel in my hand for the process of making, but also the right tool to make what I was aiming for.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder about your research methods for how you're developing these tools, how you get to this fermentation process. How important is research to you?
Super duper important. So my background, I have a pretty heavy academic background, and I've done research even in my professional life quite a lot. I was a writer and editor, so that process process of working for the World Health Organization meant that like everything I write has to be provable, has to be backed up with a lot of scientific rigor. And so reading and writing have extended into my art practice as well. And you know, when I'm making the word maps, for instance, I'm looking for sources that speak to me directly, that speak to the events that I'm coding here, and that have this kind of rich history. So it's like using aromatics in your cooking. You want something that already brings a lot of its own personality, so you can then tailor whatever you're making to be a specific taste or flavor.
Without asking you to decode these word maps, would you mind giving us a little bit of background about what they are?
Yeah. So these are part of a series that I've been doing for about 8 years. I make these word maps. I take excerpts of conversations, songs, documents, just things that I am mulling over, or the kind of things that you read and you keep going back to or you keep thinking about. And then what I do is I code and grid them, and I put this on mulberry paper, which then goes underneath my sewing machine, and I attempt to sew them in one go. The thread breaks, the paper gets rumpled, it wrinkles, the paper eventually starts behaving more like fabric. The more and more that I am sewing, stopping the needle, the needle's still in the paper, I turn the paper underneath the throat of the machine, it just gets worn and worn. And I feel like the end object, the words don't have as much power anymore. The paper carries the distress. And I now have this piece kind of resolved.
Yeah, a record with all of the info redacted.
Yeah.
But it carries the...
Like a therapeutic thing? Where the distress goes out of you and into the paper?
Yeah, it becomes numbed. Yeah, almost.
Well, this is a good transition in our final moments together. Let's open it up to some responses and comments from the audience. Questions, too.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did you start with the idea, or do you know, like, you start with the process? Like, where does the idea spark?
I keep lists of ideas and processes, and I usually have several projects underway at any time. So if I know there's something I want to say or do, I go to those lists and I start experimenting and see like, oh, what's going to match up. And so there's a lot of rejections and things that go and sit in a corner and wait for later processing. But I just keep at it until I find one that goes, that's what I was trying to do. Yeah.
Erica.
Thanks for walking us through your work, Roslyn.
Thank you.
I love the way you first, I think even in your bio, describe yourself as really being situated in the Gulf Coast. And there's something about the way you approach materials or even tell us the stories behind these materials that can only be from this place, this like level of intimacy you have with Spanish moss. Like, who else spends 6 months with this, right?
Yeah.
But just knowing a little bit about your career, you've spent so much time in other parts of the world, and I'm curious about how that informs the way you explore where you're from.
Yeah. So I've traveled extensively as a trailing spouse usually. My husband has had several posts in different countries, and some of the extended family as well has lived all over the world. But in most of those places, I've picked up. I try to go as deep as I can and actually live there and not just maintain my life as an American visiting. So you will definitely see Egypt's where my heart kind of lies because I'm pointing to my daughter. My babies were, I went there as a single, not as a single, I went there as no kids and came out with 2 older children. And so Egypt's where I became a mom. And you'll see Egypt, an Egyptian pharaonic, but also Arabesque influences showing up in my work quite often. I think it was so eye-opening, and I learned so much there. But even when I lived in Canada, I studied at the Alberta College of Arts and Design. When I lived in Norway, I learned and studied with a Norwegian knitting group. So my knitting is still Norwegian style. I've been the recipient of so much generosity from wherever I've gone. It's still in me, and it's still very much a part of me.
That feels like a beautiful place to end.
Okay, thank you, Claudia.
Thank you so much for being here today for these talks. I am delighted to introduce our final artist for the Gallery Talk program, Crystal Coulter. Crystal is a Houston-based visual artist specializing in painting. She is currently exhibiting at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago and has recently been published in New American Painting magazine. Crystal, who has aspirations to teach at the collegiate level and exhibit nationally and internationally, will receive an MFA in painting at the University of Houston this spring. Crystal.
All right, this never gets any easier, no matter how many times you do it. I talk to a crowd twice a week, and I'm still just like, ooh, scary. But hi, my name is Crystal Coulter. In the art world, I go by Crystal C because a lot of people don't really know how to say my last name right. I'm a painter, but I do dabble in a lot of other mediums. Like sometimes I do sculpture, I write a lot, graphic design at times. I make work about control and memory, and how that affects us, self and self-preservation, interpersonal relationships, and how those things intertwine in the ways that we maneuver through society. Like my dear friend Kama said in her artist talk, I didn't really intend to be an artist. It kind of stumbled upon me. I was a student athlete when I went to undergrad. I didn't really aspire to have a job at all. I've never really wanted to work. I never had a dream job growing up. I just knew that I was going to do something. So I went into undergrad as a graphic design major, and then I was like, graphic design is very hard and I don't know how to use Photoshop. So I switched my concentration to painting like halfway through. I went through a lot though in that time period of being in undergrad, and a lot of traumatic stuff happens because life be lifing a lot. And ended up studying psychology because I wanted to find a way to get through it. So in that, it kind of shaped the way that I started making work. I started looking at the way that I maneuvered through life and seeing how it would translate in my paintings a lot. And then COVID happened, which was a very pivotal point in my work, and I didn't realize how much it would shape the work until like now. The world shut down and I graduated in 2020, the spring of 2020. The worst time to try to graduate. I don't really pick the best times to graduate, I'm realizing. But yeah, I had to transition from living in Louisiana by myself to moving back with my family in Houston, and no job because there were no jobs because no one could go outside because we were dying outside, and trying to figure out how I was going to make this degree that I just spent 4 years getting a reality. I was on social media and a lot of people were having conversations with me, and I was showing a lot of people how to do stuff on Twitter, even though art Twitter was a chaotic place at that time. And people were like, you should teach. So after like 1.5 years of sitting at my house painting in my bedroom, I talked to a lot of my old professors and my mentors, and they're just like, so what are you gonna do? I was like, so what can I do to teach? Because I do not want to teach kids. I do not want to teach kids. I'm not good with kids. So they're like, maybe you can be a professor. So I was like, how do you do that? So grad school.
I'd like to say I work with chaotic spontaneity in most of my life. Everything really just I stumble upon, and that's how I get there. 3 months before applications were due, and the applications for the schools that I was applying to were due on my birthday, December 2nd. And I had to get all of the things I needed to apply to grad school, and I applied to 4 schools. And I got into 2, and I was like, well, since I got into them, I kind of have to do something now. So I chose UH. I got challenged the minute I stepped foot in here. I don't think I've been challenged that much ever in my life in regards to the things that I create. I started making work more about myself, but also talking about very universal topics like the things that are in this show. And also I realized that I could be funny in the work and not take it as serious as I was at that point. I wanted aesthetic at that point, and now I'm just kind of going off of whim and chaos and vibes. So yeah, now we're here and we're sitting in church. And so yeah, I think that's my spiel for now.
Awesome, great.
Thank you.
Crystal, I'm going to join you and we'll get more into some details about the work in this exhibition, if that's okay. And then we can open it up again to the audience for response and question. So I want to know about something that you've said to me when I visited your studio, which is that you see yourself more as a creative director than a traditional painter. So can you tell us about that process? What does it look like for you to do a body of work?
I feel like I started off painting very traditional painter. Like I was just like, I'm doing every technique I'm supposed to. The way I was taught how to paint when I was 16. I entered the Houston Livestock Show, and they were like, well, now that you got Best of Show, you should like go and learn how to paint at this one. It's like a residency, so I got to stay a month at Shriner University and learn how to paint and sculpt for 2 weeks each. I was the worst person at that camp. I could not paint. But my train of thought.
In creative directing,
like,
so
just
from there.
left me mid-sentence. Creative directing.
Yeah.
Because I was taught so traditionally. As I've gotten to the point where I'm at now, painting has been so intrinsic that there's no thought that goes behind it. So now all the thought has to go behind how much I plan. So the planning starts where I usually come up with the title of a piece first, which I just found out this year is not the normal way to make art. You don't start off with titles first. That's wild, y'all are weird, but okay. Then comes the imagery, and I start taking photos. I had dressed up for all of these. They're all self-portraiture, so I have to dress up in costume and set up sets for every one of my paintings that I do, which is ridiculous, but it's fun for me. I take everything digitally and I start making digital renderings of it, and then I make sketches of it, and then I print it, and then I build the canvases, and then I paint on them. And at that point, painting is just the last thing I'm thinking about. I'm like, let me just get it done. So yeah, I feel like the fun is in the creative directing at that point.
Can you take one of these works and walk us through the title and then the narrative behind what that means?
I want to do this one because it's the silliest. I'll do that one also. AI. I was like, hey, ChatGPT, give me a title for a piece where there's a bunch of puppet women singing in a choir. And it gave me hollowed voices and a list of 20 things. That's how to use AI ethically, guys. Stop stealing art. This one, a lot of my stuff has like puns in the title. So you know that hand game where it's like, here's the church, here's the steeple. The name of it is Open the Doors, but Where's All the People? It's a commentary on why people are not really in these spaces anymore and how they feel to not be in these spaces. So that's 2 of them. Sometimes I make a title and then I forget it after I make it once the painting's fully done, so I don't really remember the name of that one. And then Done in the Dark is based off of I think it's a scripture or like just a phrase people say in churches, what's done in the dark comes to the light. So, yeah.
What about I want to get back to something that you talked about earlier, but you mentioned lighting. You've really curated an environment here. It's an installation just as much as it is an exhibition of paintings.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what that process meant to you, like to make it all come together in this space?
I think that was actually the first thing I thought when I had to make work for my thesis. I've had this plan for almost 2 years at this point. There's an artist that I follow that makes very elaborate installations all the time. Her name is CJ Hendry, and she literally, from one of her exhibitions, she like made a bounce house that led to the exhibition, and the whole exhibition was based on psychology, and the bounce house looked like a padded room. So her work is a lot of inspirations on trying to make a space work with the artwork that's inside of it. And I was like, how did it feel to be in church at that time? And I wanted to emulate that here. So that's kind of.
What are some of the details that you decided to include when you were doing that planning?
I really wanted a pew so bad. And I'm so glad that LA Art Gallery let me borrow this pew, because pews are like $200 and I ain't got it. But, and just dramatic lighting. I feel like in church spaces, they're always very theatrical in themselves, so the lighting is always very dramatic. And that was one of the focal points I wanted to have in the work.
The combination of theater that you're mentioning, and then also you earlier brought up this idea of humor and satire. And I want to know more about the value behind making something satirical or humorous for you. What is that access that can't be accessed by just doing a straight piece of artwork?
I love that question, because I'm very Gen Z. I'm a cusp kid, so I grew up the year that it changes. And as a cusp kid, we make the most terrible moments funny for no reason. I feel like I brought a lot of that into the work as I've been like starting to come to this body of work that I'm making. I don't know. I feel like when it's something serious, an entry point to serious conversations a lot of time is humor, especially like things like mental health. So, yeah.
And it is a serious topic that you're exploring here. It's about structures and systems of just society, societal systems, and sometimes how they can fail people. You've said you were raised in the religious South. So how does that background inform your current understanding of those structures?
I feel like I'm discovering it more and more each day. But systems are formulaic. A lot of times these systems play the roles that they play and disenfranchise people the ways they do because of how they were built up. You can't really change a system. You have to like dismantle it from the ground up. And a lot of the roles in those systems is to treat other people like trash, sadly. I've had, I was gonna say the disadvantage, but also it's kind of a luxury to be in a lot of spaces. At a very, I think I'm still kind of young, I ain't 30 yet, at a young age. And I'm in a lot of them that have and are actively disenfranchising me and treating me like trash. The intention behind having this work in this space specifically is I wanted to have work in an institution that has not only failed me, the school has also, as an institution, has failed people, including myself. And it's a big middle finger, honestly.
A critical response.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I make work out of spite a lot. I feel like a lot of that fuels the work. This is definitely an instance of it fueling the work.
Do you feel like in your explorations here, you've exhausted these questions of like critical inquiry into these systems of structure?
No.
You feel like it's generated more questions?
I think it has. Someone asked me a question yesterday, like who is to blame? Whether it's the system or the people who are in it, because ultimately they're also affected by the system. It's just a cycle. I don't know the answer to that yet, and I don't know if like as a human being living life that we'll ever get to the root of that. So that's a question I'm gonna have to continue to unpack and like learn for myself. But.
Well, thank you for creating this environment for us to all come together today.
Thank you.
And wonder after these questions and leave with our own interpretations and curiosities. I think it's really powerful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's talk about it. What do you guys have to say? What responses, what questions do we bring to Crystal?
I have something to admit to.
Okay.
I came around the wall there and I saw papers on the floor and I started to pick them up. And then I realized, no, I didn't have the changing your, can you explain?
Yeah, significance of the crumpled papers, which also appear on the pedestal.
I think like distortion and redaction is something that interests me, like what people choose to leave out of conversations, especially in these spaces. So what I did is I took the format of my childhood Bible. I found my childhood Bible. I went digging. And I looked at how it was formatted, and I wrote not my own version of the Bible, but a story about how I got to the point where I'm at now. Very pivotal moment, it's kind of sad. And printed it on Bible paper and have displayed it as a redaction. A lot of people don't know these things about me, so I just was like, let me just give people tidbits of what, like a part of me, I guess. So yeah. Thank you.
I noticed you also have a program
I
at
do.
the beginning. Can you tell us about the writing that's in the program?
Yes. The writing is the same writing that's on all of these sheets. I just felt like it'd be easier for y'all to actually read the information in it if it was in a program. Also, the art of making a program is hilarious. So it was very fun to make. Even though I switched my major from graphic design, I still do a lot of graphic design because I guess I couldn't leave it. It's at heart. So yeah, y'all are free to pick them up if y'all want to and read what's inside of them. Yeah.
You said this institution harmed you how?
Can I say still?
Safe space.
Is it? Well, I mean, how much can I say? Well, I used to work here.
Okay.
It wasn't.
That in itself, huh?
I've also watched as a teacher, because I also teach here, how the school handles situations where students are either not mentally well or they're in harm's way in general, including my own personal situations dealing with people not respecting me as a person. Yeah, they don't handle it well, but their whole intention is to not. They're trying to protect themselves a lot of times. So, and that's the most politically safe way I can talk about this situation legality-wise. So, thank you.
Yes.
Hi.
Question.
Mhm.
Your paintings are lovely.
Thank you.
Is there a reason for the gold leaf? That's,
Mhm.
it's like it looks recurring.
Yeah. Story time. One time I had a studio visit where a professor said something crazy to me that should not be filmed. Because of that, she was having a critique on me putting piercings on my child self and how that's not correct for some reason. So I started adorning every single piece with it as an act of spite, because I'm spiteful. I mean it, I'm spiteful. I do it every time. But it's a way to adorn these characters, make them feel more larger than life than they actually are. Yeah. Only the figures have gold leaf on them, I realized when I set up all the work in the show. Mm-hmm. Yes.
What's the significance of the youngest figure's mouth being painted over?
Oh, that is a childhood image of myself. I like using the same childhood image of me like sitting, one of those school ones, because that was kind of the pivotal age when all of this was like happening. But I didn't really have a voice. I wasn't really allowed to speak. Women in my church were not really allowed to speak. I grew up Baptist. Women don't really have autonomy in Baptist religion. So it's a commentary on who's allowed to be righteous and who's not. So. Anybody else?
How else can we support your work?
Well,
That's a good question.
That is a good. Got good questions. I show in Houston pretty often. Showing up to the shows, showing up to openings. I'm also on social media. My Instagram and all my information is on the back of the program because I ran out of business cards. I'm not gonna lie to you. Yeah, and also just having conversations like this is beneficial. So. Oh, buy some work. Buy some. I'll make prints if you ask. Yeah, buy some. I'm broke. Yeah.
All right. Last call? Okay. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank y'all.